It's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In the last blog I talked about having a loved one critically ill in intensive care. Your comfort zone is your enemy. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog I want to talk about critical illness in intensive care. Is it time for a new paradigm? Before I get into today's topic, I want to share a quote with you that I wrote on today's topic, and the quote says, "When your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, the scenes are set. The all-domineering expert intensive care team is dealing with a submissive family of a critically ill patient. This quote-unquote therapeutic relationship isn't healthy or quote-unquote therapeutic at all from the start, and it doesn't help that 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care make no informed decisions, have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence." The current paradigm and framework in intensive care has been wrongly set by society, and society still wrongly believes that patients and their families need to suck up to the perceived power and the perceived authority of intensive care teams. Current paradigms in intensive care are also set around the politics, the hierarchies, the financial budgets, the bed management policies, the psychology, and the intrigue in intensive care. None of it is evident for families of critically ill patients in intensive care when they first come in contact with critical illness in intensive care. In order to get a handle on things quickly, in order to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence, families in intensive care need to very quickly assert themselves, do their own research, start asking the right questions, and move their goals and outcomes in a direction that gets them to achieve their goals. This suggests that a strong paradigm shift from mainstream intensive care, where intensive care teams are still living and operating in a vacuum, where nobody is really watching over their shoulders to make sure they are doing all the right things. So let's get into today's topic. When you are first confronted with the critical illness of your loved one in intensive care, you most likely are completely out of your comfort zone, and you simply don't know what to do because you don't know what you don't know. And that's okay. You didn't ask for this situation in the first place. Nevertheless, wouldn't it be good if you had proven strategies and tools to deal with this situation quickly? Because it is an extraordinary situation, and also a situation that you can't escape. As I said in the quote in the beginning, the paradigm, the rules and the frameworks in intensive care tend to be set from the get-go when you are first confronted with your loved one's critical illness. And no, I'm not talking about your loved one being in intensive care for a day or two. I'm talking about situations where your loved one is critically ill in intensive care and is either very unstable and in a very critical condition, is in a life-threatening situation, is not waking up after an induced coma, or is in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, including long-term ventilation. Or your loved one may be having a severe or traumatic head or brain injury. Or your loved one may be threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order. or your loved one is in a situation where the intensive care team suggests that a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment is being quote unquote in the best interest for your critically ill loved one, or your loved one may even be approaching the end of life in intensive care. And those are the situations where the intensive care team is even more concerned about managing the paradigm when it comes to the critical illness of your loved one. The intensive care team is concerned about staying in control at all times. They are concerned about outcomes, treatment, care, about staying in control of the diagnosis, prognosis, and most importantly about the management and meaning in all of this. Keep in mind, the stakes are extremely high for intensive care teams. Intensive care is a multi-billion-dollar per year industry, with intensive care teams being in competition for funding, recognition, promotions, limited resources, and the list goes on and on. I'm only scratching the surface here. This is what's going on in the mind of intensive care teams. So how do I know? Well, after more than 15 years intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, where I literally worked with thousands of critically ill patients and their families, as well as when working with clients one-on-one in my counseling and consulting over the phone or Skype or via email, I have seen my fair share of the struggles that families in intensive care are going through. On the other hand, I have also worked as a nurse unit manager in intensive care for more than 5 years, where I have seen more than enough to know and understand what's going on behind the scenes in intensive care. Now, back to you. So what about your and your family's stakes in this situation where your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Let me tell you this. Your family's and your critically ill loved one's stakes are much higher, that's for sure. And that's not how the intensive care team looks at it. The reality and the fact of the matter is that intensive care teams are the master of setting the paradigm, and the bad news is that families of critically ill patients in intensive care let them do it and they don't question. Instead, it's really time that you and your family start setting your paradigm the minute you enter intensive care and the minute you realize that you can't allow yourself to be a victim of circumstances. This is really important. Don't do what the 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care are doing, because you'll end up with making no informed decisions, no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence. The minute you enter the intensive care unit, you need to have your own strong paradigm about this situation, and you need to be determined from the start to get what you want in this once-in-a-lifetime situation that you know you can't afford to get wrong. And this is exactly where most families in intensive care get it wrong from the start. They are submissive. They are waiting to be led by the intensive care team without realizing that the intensive care team knows exactly what to say, how to say it, when to say it, and they also know what not to say. The intensive care team knows exactly how to stay in control if you let them. In essence, the 99% of the families in intensive care who make no informed decisions, have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence, wrongly buy into the paradigm of the intensive care team being the perceived power and the perceived authority. The fact of the matter is that if you want to stay in control of your and your critically ill loved one's destiny, you need to be proactive. You can't be idle, and you can't afford to not take charge and control. I have seen way too many situations in my clinical practice, as well as in my one-on-one counseling and consulting practice, where families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't do their own research, they don't start asking the right questions, and they therefore don't set the paradigm that they know they need in order to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence, and ultimately get what they want. It really starts with you and your family having the right frame of mind from the start. Starts the minute you enter the intensive care unit for the very first time. It needs to show in your body language, in your communication style, in your tone of voice, in the questions that you're asking, and more importantly in how much you believe in yourself that you can master this challenge. We all know that a paradigm shift is necessary when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, and we also know that you are in control of it when you are doing the right things from the get-go. It'll be up to you to implement it from the start, and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. So, how can you become the best advocate for your critically ill loved one, make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence quickly whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You get to that all-important feeling of making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, control, power and influence, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions, discover the many competing interests in intensive care, and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustrations, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 mind-blowing tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care, and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again next week in another update. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section, where I answer your questions, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Or you can call us. Find international phone numbers on the Contacts tab. Also check out our ebook section, where you get more ebooks, videos and audio recordings, and where you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me via Skype or over the phone, and via email by clicking on the email and phone counseling tabs on the top of the website. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.